Welcome again to PRNEWS Live on LinkedIn. Today's edition is a bit of a coming home party for all of us. Our two guests were here about 9 months ago in June 2020 when we did our first LinkedIn Live. So welcome again, Dwayna and Neil. Before welcoming our guests, I'd like to invite you, our audience, to send your questions for our guests. We'd really like to include them in this session. So, on to our guests. First, we welcome Dwayna Haley, a young veteran of PR and communication. Dwayna has led marketing communication for Fortune 500 brands as an SVP at Porter Novelli, where she leads work on the agency's anchor tenant, Bayer. Importantly, she was appointed to the inaugural Next board of the PR Council in 2018. And among her many accolades, she's a member of the Wall of Fame at her alma mater, Middle Tennessee State University. Go Blue. So, Dwayna, welcome. And since it is Black History Month, we're asking everybody who their favorite Black History Month figure is, or just your favorite for this day or this week. I know there's so many. So, Dwayna, welcome, and tell us who your favorite BHM figure is.
Absolutely. Well, good afternoon to everyone, and definitely thank you for joining in and the invite, Seth. I would say for me, it is my former manager, but still colleague, Ayanna Robinson. She has newly been appointed this year as Porter Novelli's Chief Client Officer. She is the first person of color and certainly the first Black woman to be placed in our C-suite at Porter Novelli. And she's just someone that, for me in my career, has been an incredible mentor, a friend, and an aspiration, if you will, of the exact type of executive that I aim to be. And I'm just so proud of her nearly 20 years of service at Porter Novelli, and certainly the groundbreaking, ways she continues to move within our industry and our organization.
Great. Now, we also have Neil Foote. Neil is, as he says, an old school journalist, but a new school storyteller. In his youth, which wasn't all that long ago, he was a newspaperman, having worked at the Washington Post and the Miami Herald and the Dallas Morning News. He's also worked in corporate communication, and he now wears several hats, and all very well. He's principal of Foote Communications in Dallas. He's an academic at the University of North Texas's Mayborn School of Journalism, and not least, he is the president of the National Black Public Relations Society. Welcome, Neil. Same question for you to begin. Tell us about your BHM figure that you're going to salute this day with us.
It's so great to be back with you all again in this conversation. And yeah, I chose someone who was really a role model growing up, was Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm. I grew up in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn and had a chance as a young kid to meet her as she was walking the district. My aunt, who could be another role model, had been involved, and perhaps the inspiration of why I'm in communications today, had been in PR and development in the 60s and 70s in New York and Brooklyn, and worked with such wonderful people like Congresswoman Chisholm, who laid the groundwork in 1972 when she, as an African-American woman, ran for president, creating all sorts of furor and controversy within the Democratic Party. But if you kind of look at what she did as a trailblazer, really laid the groundwork for so many others who ran for president in later years. And certainly, as we've heard President Obama talk about her great inspiration to him of leading his charge to president. So she reminds me every day of the fight you got to fight, the good fight you got to fight to make change.
Great. That's a great example. Both of them were great examples. Both women. I like to see that. I certainly recall Representative Chisholm being a New Yorker. and growing. Of course, I was a child at that time, Neil, but I do remember. I certainly remember her quite well, and of course, we saw her in that FX series as well. So anyway, the reason we're back here today on Black History Month. The last time we got together, Dwayna, you said something in response to a question. I said, what do you think diversity will look like if the three of us get together in about a year from now? Well, we're only about 9 months, but we'll say it's let's round it out to a year. Let's see what you said back then. Let's see if we can cue that up, Nick, and see what you said, and you'll comment on it on the other side. Okay, let's see if it rolls. Well, it's rolling without sound. We thought that might be the case. So fortunately, fortunately, I know what you said. You know what you said. We basically asked you, what will diversity look like a year from now? And your response, and I'll paraphrase you, was we'll probably look about.
The predictor is going to look like what it looks like today. What I am hopeful is that the cries and the pain that we are seeing today is shedding light for people who are sitting within the comfort of privilege, for our decision makers, for our business leaders, such that we will see that intent drive our actions.
Dwayna, thank you. So basically, Dwayna, the initial part of your statement was you thought that diversity would look pretty similar in a year from then, which was June, to the next time we got together, which we said would be June 2021. It's actually February 2021. So my question to you, has anything changed? Has your viewpoint changed in the light of things that have happened since then?
No, my viewpoint hasn't changed. I will say there have been what we've seen in just the perfect storm of last year in the pandemic, the polarized, political environment we were in, and then the upheaval and uproar of social injustice. Generally, what we see as media and news people is that the news cycle is short. Something happens, we move on because something greater gets our attention. But I think that perfect storm of things has created a sustained level of attention to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, such that brands, businesses, leaders can't opt out because it's still a conversation. And so we've certainly seen there be lots of appointments of diversity, equity, and inclusion officers within organizations. We've certainly seen a lot of people elevated. We've seen lots of recruitment and retention practices shift. And of those brands doing well, I think many of them are doing exhaustive audits such that you don't necessarily see the action externally right now, but there is some churn and some movement and things happening internally that will hopefully present themselves in transparency soon. So not a whole lot of shift in 9 months, but certainly that sustained attention and awareness and cry from the people certainly puts the commitment there that I believe we will begin to see some shifts that are happening.
Great. Neil, your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think, I think one of the things we discussed last year is that the conversation has to take place. So what did last year do was, for all the right reasons, despite the drama that was going on, people were forced to talk about this issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, hello, I think awareness and consciousness about the issue is the biggest hurdle, right, Dwayna? Is just getting people to realize there's a problem here. It's not just Dwayna and I out there talking about it because that's something we wake up worried about every day. It's a real issue. So the good thing, there have been more conversations about this issue. It's been some action. look, I know some of my good friends have gotten promotions, which is like here. Some of them have gotten, leadership promotions to the chief diversity officer level, which, certainly puts them in the C-suite, which again is positions that some folks didn't get to before. We've got the Diversity Action Alliance, coalition of a group of organizations led by, including the PR Council and PRSA and Page Society, the Institute for Public Relations, NBPRS is part of that, and Hispanic Public Relations. So we've got players at the table, and the Diversity Action Alliance is getting folks who are signing up for the pledge to not only commit to improve diversity, but also participate in an audit. So, we're hoping at least we'll have some benchmarking, even though, we see where those numbers are. I think the good news is that even a month into this year, that the conversations are continuing to be real, that folks are realizing that accountability is now at issue, that just because you talked a good talk last year, it's time to walk that walk. And I know for our organization, there were folks who were critical of us of saying, well, why are you part of a DAA when there's no profound statement or requirement for agencies or corporations to actually appoint someone? And I said, look, if I can be in the room and and be part of that conversation to make the change, that's one step. But we all got to have to work together in our respective positions and roles to continue to keep the pressure on. And I think, 2020, whether it was Black Lives Matter, and that's a movement that's not going anywhere, for us and diversity in this industry, Seth, as you bring us back together again, I think we're both here because we remain hopeful. We know there's lots of work to be done. And the thing is, that Dwayna and I, we're not going anywhere. We're not going to just sit in the corner saying, okay, mission accomplished. This is a long road. And we're going to fight it until we see more and more representation.
Well said, Neil. The next thing I want to look at, and speaking of all of what you both just said, is one of the things that we've done at PR News is we've tried at least to highlight diversity even more, and we now have a dedicated section on our site. I know both of you have written articles in there. One article that we had recently was written by a VP at Fin Partners, Ariane Lovell, and her argument is, and I think we're going to show this article now, it ran about a week or so ago, is that BHM this year cannot be a 28-day celebration, and it's got to be a special year. And I think both of you have both mentioned that, and there's the article coming up. And I'm just wondering, did you see anything in her article? She talks a lot about systemic racism and recruiting and retention. Is there anything in the article that struck you, Dwayna?
Yeah, I think just the headline in itself, that 2021 cannot just be another year, is huge. And I think what she's saying is absolutely true, in that now marks an occasion that, we're talking about all this change, much to the question that we, addressed earlier, and the shifts that we want to see, which means that we've got to stop marginalizing the celebration of our people and the elevation of our people and the education about our people to 28 days. You can't rewrite 400 years of systemic oppression and history in a month of saying, yay, go being Black, it's not enough. And so I think that the more we see, to Neil's point, folks elevated into positions in the C-suite, positions of executive levels across the board, then you have more representation there in order to prioritize and bring to light sustained moments and conversation that would keep these issues in the light. I think it's easy, again, much like the news cycle, something's in and out. It's like, okay, let's just get past this 28 days and then we can go back to, BAU, business as usual. And I think that with everything that happened last year, now is the moment for, if there is going to be a shift, let's stop marginalizing the discussion to 28 days. Let's make sure that we are committed to progress year round.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And I think Yeah, the other key point she talks about empower, which I think goes to this issue of where do I begin, right? So many CEOs and agency principals are like, where do I begin? I've tried hiring, I have a few. It has to start somewhere. So that start somewhere really begins with empowering those who are on your current team. Point them to key committees, allow them to participate and lead in at least as observers on major account presentations, so that they see how it's done, so that you can provide these individuals the opportunity to realize here's the work you have to put in to succeed at that kind of level. Allow them to lead some presentations in some meetings to the senior executives, so that they can see, oh, I didn't know there were we had this great talent, because we know, and we all can speak to it, is that unless the senior executive team know who you are, even as a young person on the team, you will never get the time of the day. Because look, face it, it's a dog-eat-dog world. Every individual at an agency, a company is fighting for the next level. Unless you give some exposure to younger folks, and particularly diverse individuals at an early stage, they just will get lost. And we have to make that conscious effort, which I love that point here of empowering. Find unique ways to empower those individuals to get exposure to the company in ways that will help them feel a part of the team and get them recognized for future opportunities.
Neil, you wrote an article about a year ago for us, and it had convenient diversity in the title. And you said it's no longer time for convenient diversity. It sounds like it's a great segue from what you and Dwayna have been talking about just now. Tell me, both of you, what do you think? And I think we're going to show Neil's article here. What do you think might be the situation in late May of this year, when the first anniversary of George Floyd's killing comes up? Will companies be, asked what they've done, especially those that have said, oh, we support Black Lives Matter, et cetera, et cetera? Will there be a grand reckoning, or will it be more, as you both have said, which is, this isn't going away, we're still here? Dwayna?
I certainly hope that there's a grand reckoning. I mean, I certainly hope that there is hyper-focused lens that is placed to everyone who decided to be loud and proud around the messaging last year of George Floyd. We're seeing it a bit even this year. I mean, just recently passed the 1-year mark of Ahmaud Arbery's murder. And I think that we see the messaging, right? And I think the messaging is always the easiest thing for brands and companies to do. It's the action behind it. So what I would like to see, I'll say, is that, for those companies that made a grand stand last year, for them to commit to coming forward and saying, here's what we've accomplished in the last year, and here's what we're committed to continuing to do. I don't know that we'll see it. I'm always a little bit skeptical in situations like this, but I think that Mr. Floyd's death certainly hit home in a way that we haven't seen before in previous instances like that. And so I'm hopeful that we will see the grand reckoning, and if nothing else, that audiences that support these brands, purchase from these brands and companies and whatnot, that they vote their conscience with their dollars and their support and their conversation, and they require that of the brands and companies that they support.
Neil, let me ask you a slight variation on that question. In light of what Dwayna just said, how would you advise communicators at companies as the anniversary comes up? What would you advise them to do? And
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there's a good template out there that says, yes, we have to acknowledge what has been done in the past year, and we should do that in a significant way, both internally, and externally. So internally, you're making sure that employees kind of feel the importance of this moment, that it wasn't convenient last year to have a moment of silence or to have, listening sessions about how we feel about this, or calling out the Black employee around at the meeting to say, so are you okay? Yeah, right. And I don't know how many times I've heard that conversation, right? But so that, let's move around and say, hey, that happened. I love what Dwayna said about, let's point out what has been done, and more importantly, you'll figure out ways to say, here are other benchmarks that we raised. Look, our bar was low last year. We raised it, and guess what? The year ahead, it's raised even more. And the anecdote to convenience is accountability, right? So accountability means if you set goals that are quantifiable, measurable, all those things that we expect when we're asking any of our account execs to manage an account, right? And our clients are demanding from us, so do we get coverage? How much coverage? What type of coverage? Can you get more? Is the same kind of metrics we need for this. It's like, okay, guys, that was good. Now here's where we're going this year. And if it gets a little hot in here over the next year, that's what's going to happen. We're going to do, we're continuing to make changes structurally, how we manage our clients, because I think, here's what the flip side of a post-May is, and what I would advise my clients is that, our clients are going to hold us, that's where they're accountable.
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be more who are going to say, well, I saw your statement from your CEO last year, and we're up to for account renewal, and I'm still seeing only Neil in the room when I have my creative meetings and my development meetings and my pitch meetings. So can you tell me more? What else are you doing, or where else is that going? So we have to kind of turn that mirror inward and kind of say, okay, everybody's watching, and particularly the folks who are writing big checks, and we can't, none of us, given the economy of the past year, and certainly the uncertainty of the economy in the next year, afford to lose to any client, no less a major client, who says, sorry, going down the road to someone else who can help me out.
You make a good point there, Neil, about difficult conversations, and it reminds me of an article that you wrote, Dwayna, because you again in the title it was "Time to Get Uncomfortable." You wrote it for us, and we thank you for that. There's another aspect to. There's so many aspects, but there's one more that I wanted to cover before we go. And that is the buzzification, if you want, of DEI. A recent article that we had where a young communicator named Cedric Brown from Washington, who's in Washington, D.C., he's from Detroit, he made the point that the D part of DEI, while it's not easy, is perhaps the easiest of the three, D, E, and I. And his point was inclusion is so important. Keeping people welcome, giving them, as you said, Neil, just before, giving them performance metrics to reach, giving them mentorship, keeping them essentially in the company and welcoming them in the company. That kind of woke me up to something that I really hadn't thought of. Do you want? Again, we have the article up on the board here, which is great. Dwayna, do you have a comment on that article?
Yeah, I do think that. Yeah, I think that of diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity is probably the easier part. Yeah. The equity, I would say, equity and inclusion are the parts that are needing the most advancement and commitment and rigor around that. I remember once being at a conference and hearing head of agencies share that for his senior leadership team, he connected their bonus structure annually to DE&I metrics in addition to their performance metrics. And that, he actually had the situation where one senior executive performed outstanding across the board in performance, but didn't really pay much attention to the DE&I part of it, because thinking that, well, I performed well for the company. And so they actually had to reduce his bonus as such. And, he was angry about that. And he was like, this is how important us aligning to this commitment is that maybe if you see it come out of your pockets, you'll understand it's not optional for us to operate like this as a company, that we are inclusive, that we are giving equity, and that we are intentional about diversity. So yeah, I do think the D is the easier part. One of the things that I've also been challenging my client and also client teams with is that, I'll ask my clients, especially when they all show up and it's a room full of white faces. And so I've shared in the past year. So correct me if I'm wrong. The audience that you're speaking to, is everybody white? And they're all like, well, no. And I was like, okay, so give me the breakdown. You got maybe 60% white, 10% Black, 15% Hispanic. And they're like, so they'll give me the, that easy pie chart that we see. And I'm like, great. I would challenge you to make sure that your room matches that. 60%, 15%, 10%, to make sure that the audience that you are speaking to is representative, so that we can ensure that we are having the correct conversation. And I'll mirror that as well on my end. So I think that, small challenges like that from people like me who are in senior level positions that have the autonomy to be able to challenge clients in that way is the thing that is going to help that DE&I needle move, and not just about, as I talked about the last time, the vanity metrics that we get, so accustomed to, which is, oh, we're going to hire 5% more diversity or 25% more diversity. And I'm like, do we look at white hires in that way? Like, we're going to keep it to 25%. You know what I mean? So I think that it is really important that for those of us who have a voice, and even those junior folks, that we use that voice to disrupt what is easy and comfortable to align with DE&I.
And speaking of uncomfortable, I see that we do have your article ready here to go up here. So let's show Dwayna's article if we can, Nicole, about uncomfortable conversations. I want to ask one last question. I know our time is quickly evaporating here, and that's about the coronavirus. There's Dwayna's article. It's time to get uncomfortable. Great. About the coronavirus, we know how it is disproportionately touching communities of color. Unfortunately, we also see that vaccination is way out of proportion with whites versus communities of color. I know your husband, let's get personal, I know your husband just got the vaccine. We hope he's doing well. He is, good. And again, to be personal, I know Neil's in Dallas, in the Dallas area, so we hope you're doing well over there as well, Neil. But talk to us just briefly, both of you, if you would, about what communicators can do in terms of encouraging people of color to get vaccinated. This is an issue as well. Neil, you want to go first?
Sure thing. Just real quick, a shout out to Cedric Brown. Quick note on Cedric. He worked when he was at Syracuse. He worked with Rochelle Ford, Dean now at Elon, on Beeper's research study that we released back in 2016. So thanks, Cedric. You'll be getting a call from us. We need your young mind and brains to move us forward. On the pandemic, the importance of this, and one of the clients that I've been working with are a couple of twin sister doctors out of Philadelphia, Doctors Wardlaw, Dr. McDonald, and they are aggressively using their platform within Philadelphia and around the country to dispel the myths that the vaccine really is one of our best preventers for so many diseases over the past 70 years, going back to polio and many of the fears that we've heard our parents talk about, right? Of getting that polio, but standing in line and getting that vaccine and transforming a nation in that way. So I just would encourage that for I think all agencies that have an opportunity to kind of present some messaging that debunk the myths, reassure the trust. And the twin sister doctors talked about trust and transparency, because there's inherently distress about the medical community, but we have to just reassure folks that this is one step of many that we all have to take to get back to whatever normal is going to look like, keep ourselves healthy and safe, and our families moving on. The tragedies of 500,000 plus deaths is not something we want to be known for. And we know a disproportion of those are African American, and we want to make sure that we don't continue that trend.
Well, I think we're at the end of our time here, but Dwayna and Neil, thank you again so much. We could have gone on for another 30 minutes, and I will extend an invitation to you both right now that we'll do this again, and maybe not in 9 months. Let's do it at the year anniversary and really and drill down again into diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank you again, Dwayna Haley from Porter Novelli, Neil Foote from the National Black Relations Society. One quick announcement: look for our PR News Crisis virtual event on March 24th and 25th. Go to our website. Thank you again for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful day.